I'm Bill Flagg. I have been a serial entrepreneur my whole life, and I've grown a handful of companies and been a part of growing a handful of companies from what you call 1 to 10 million, and have seen a lot go down. That's fun, exciting, and agonizing. And my last company was, I had a company called Reg Online that did online registration for conferences and events that we sold 8 years ago when it was about 10 million in revenue. And since then, I'm now involved with I'm co-owner with 5 different companies in the area: Survey Gizmo, Snap Engage, Sticker Giant, Poster Brain, and a kids camp called Avid for Adventure. And they all share a common property, which is they were customer funded, no outside investors, very profitable companies that grew under their own profitability very successfully. So this is a panel that's very near and dear to my heart. And with that, I'd like to introduce my esteemed colleagues here. So we've got Dan.
Yeah, I'm Dan Koenigsberg. I founded about 15 years ago a company called Campminder. We're here in Boulder. We do web-based business management solutions for summer camps. So we help summer camps with their lead management and their registration and their billing and invoicing and transportation scheduling, staffing, alumni management, and photo sharing, and pretty much anything that a camp needs to do to operate their business. And we are, hoping to get to 8 million this year, somewhere 7 to 8 million. And we are self-funded and feeling the agony right now.
Thank you very much. My name is Christian Vanek. I'm the CEO and one of the co-founders of Survey Gizmo. We are Boulder-based. We started 10 years ago in April, so we just technically had our 10th year anniversary, which we plan on celebrating by having a big party. We just crossed the $10 million mark. We're shooting for 12 or 13 this year. And that was a very interesting journey. So as far as this panel is concerned, we've completed that endpoint now, and now we're looking into the great void beyond. So in terms of what Survey Gizmo does, hopefully everyone has heard of us. I really hope so. But we are an online survey provider, advanced capabilities. We're used by market researchers, company insights groups, customer insights groups, sorry, and businesses large and small, pretty much everywhere.
I got my own mic. Lucky. I'm Jason Eckenroth, and it's taken me a little bit to figure out how to what my title is or my intro is, but it's starting to feel a little bit more. It's starting to work out a little bit better. So I am the former founder and CEO of Ship Compliant. It is a software company in Boulder that helps beverage alcohol companies meet all their tax and compliance needs. Founded it really, I started in college like in the late 90s, but it was just kind of a slow evolution. But launched the SaaS product in 2006. And the company was acquired in April of last year. I had a Boulder Startup Week interview, actually, is like now exactly a year ago, about that, and it was only a few weeks after the sale. And then I departed the company about 8 weeks ago or so. And in terms of like size and scale, it took us 9 years to get to our first 1 million, and actually, no, it took us eight years to get to our first 1 million in revenue. By year 9.5, we were profitable sustainably, and then grew it profitably from that to a $12 million run rate as of the time I left the business, a few months ago.
I want to get a sense of the audience real quick. So by show of hands, who here is involved in a company or has a company that's 0 to 1 million in revenue? Okay. 2 to 1 to 5 million, 5 to 10 million, 10 million plus. Okay, great. It's good mix in the audience here. So I thought it'd be fun to start off with getting real fast because there's a lot of agony and it's kind of hard to dig into it without getting into nitty-gritty details. And it was Christian's birthday yesterday, and I asked, so how was your birthday? And your answer was?
My first birthday present yesterday morning was our lead gen has been broken since Friday, and our sales team hasn't gotten any leads since then. My second gift was the way it was broken was that all people filling out those forms got error messages for the last couple of days. And the sales team did actually know about that, but they didn't actually tell anyone. So, happy birthday. And I learned this right before a BizDev call.
And I got a call from Jason last night saying Dan's had a pretty challenging day yesterday as well. And I said, is he still going to be able to show up here? It sounds pretty serious. So, Dan, what happened yesterday?
It was pretty dicey, a little shaky right now. So on Monday, just got a kind of normal slack, like something's wrong with the form system. People are trying to print forms and they're getting an error. So I kind of had this gut feeling that something bigger was going on. It turns out that our hosting provider did not notify us that we ran out of space on a storage device that we use. So everything was erroring out. And then it turned out later that day, to add insult to injury, that we had been migrating files from somewhere else to that storage device. And even though it wasn't writing them to the place that was full, it was still deleting the files from where they were. So camps were starting and lots of forms were deleted, and we have had to try to figure that one out.
So if you guys, here we got almost 8 and almost 12 million in revenue. If you guys think your problems go away when you get more revenue, the answer is no. So I want to shift the conversation a little bit to more philosophical, because this panel is about sort of the agony and the ecstasy. You got a little agony for customer-funded companies, meaning companies that were built without institutional or outside investors, built based through their own growing profitability. Why are you a customer-funded company and in a sea of highly funded tech companies, especially in this town, right? Why'd you do it? Or why are you doing?
I guess I'm holding the mic, so I'll just keep talking and then I'll pass it over here. For me, it wasn't a choice. Like I was in college. I had been a camp counselor, and I was, going to get like an internship and do something, get a real job, as my parents said. So I got a real job, and then while I was there, I had an idea for something to help the camp that I went to, and I started building it. And I wasn't in Boulder. I wasn't an entrepreneur. My dad was on business calls with me saying, like, this is what Dan thinks, So, it wasn't like, I'm going to write a business plan and start a huge business or, this or that. It was just, I started doing this thing. And, I was like, what do I need now? Oh, I need somebody to help me. So then I had enough money at one point to hire somebody. And then, there's enough money to hire another person. And then at a certain point, it was like people would come out of the woodwork saying, I could be your COO, and I'd like to take 30% of your business. And I was like, that sounds like that would be helpful. My dad's like, that's preposterous. So I didn't do that, and I'm glad I didn't do that. And I guess here we are today, and investors are calling, and I'm thinking to myself, I really like being able to make choices. I really don't want to have to perform I don't really we're making money, but I like what I do and I like the people who surround me, and I don't want to perform financial results for somebody else and have them put pressure on me. I don't want to feel that way. So that's my story.
Great, thanks.
Sure. So why were we customer funded or bootstrapped? And we didn't really have a choice either, and because I didn't really have an idea. Like when I started the company, I read a book after I met David Cohen of this was before he had launched Techstars as his business partner, David Brown had written a book after they had exited their business. It was called Pinpoint Technologies, and they had bootstrapped it to maybe 10 million, I think, and then sold it. And his name of his book was No Vision, All Drive. And it really resonated with me because I had absolutely no idea what I was doing when I had graduated college and started the business. So it was a pretty iterative process to find this niche in beverage alcohol, and then the niche of the niche in compliance in beverage alcohol. And by that point, I was pretty beaten up from just trying to scrap it together and fighting against venture-backed businesses in town for salaries, for office space, for attention, PR, recognition, and that, after 6 years of that kind of operating in the shadows, you kind of get a chip and you're like, well, I don't need it. I'm going to do this despite the fact that we don't have the advantage. And in fact, that I think became part of our culture in our business, and it manifested in a core value of our company. We refer to it as scale it, and it was around making sure 1 + 1 always equaled 3, and because we had to. We had no choice. If it didn't equal 3, then we'd run out of money and die.
And ditto, yeah. I mean, essentially, when we first got started, we were so busy trying to grow it, and we actually had customers pretty much right from the beginning. We didn't give a lot of thought until SurveyMonkey was acquired, and then all of a sudden, everyone was really interested in survey software. And we got a lot of calls, and it was really, we felt really pretty. But when we really started thinking about it, it was pretty much the same thing. If we take money from someone, who will be our customer? The thousands of people paying $19 a month, or the person that gave us a couple of $1 million. And the freedom that being customer funded offers was really appealing. And I'll add one last thing in hindsight. I would not change that decision. So even as painful as it sometimes is growing from our own growth, the business has allowed me to grow with it. So it's almost every 6 months I have to become a new form of CEO. And if I had a bunch of money, I might be able to grow the business faster, but I don't know if I could grow myself faster to keep up with it. And then I would be gone.
I think, Christian, you had a good point about growing the business with yourself. I found, particularly because we're in, I prefaced it all that, hey, we're in this small market, but there's some things you can't accelerate. And sometimes market adoption, you just can't accelerate. And so having additional raised funds gives you additional dry powder to make experiments. That's good, but it also puts a ton of pressure on you to have the discipline to make those bets really, really smartly, and most companies don't. And so they'll be wasteful, and they won't even realize it until they look back on the results, and you know what? They haven't made that market penetration as quickly as they expected. Now, in the American beverage alcohol market, it's just a slow adoption. And so we had a lot of venture-backed competitors that spent money faster than the market would allow them to grow. And we just had to be patient. I didn't realize it at the time. It felt like we were going to get destroyed by these companies, but we just needed to be patient. They'd spend their money out and run themselves out of business.
So I'll add a little perspective. After selling Reg Online, I was also a significant owner of a company that had raised some money, and we thought, I got involved because I thought they were going to stop raising money. And it soon became clear that they were on a path to constantly spend more than they were making, and had to constantly raise more money. And it was interesting because it was going side by side with my companies that were clearly never had any funding, that we were growing organically. And it was like year after year, I'd compare the growth dynamics of both businesses, and the funded company wasn't growing faster than my non-funded companies. But they sure were dishing out a lot more equity. In fact, it just I saw the dilution continue to go and go and go. On top of that, I found the amount of time that my the CEOs spent in each of the companies. The funded company, he spent an inordinate amount of time dealing with investors, boards, what's going to happen, how are we going to get the next round? Okay, let's bridge the round with some venture debt. And I looked at that and I thought he can only use half his time to build his company because of this dynamic, and also a lot more frustration too, because as entrepreneurs we feel pulled to wanting to serve our customers, and we kind of get pulled into having to serve the investors if we're funded.
I mean, just one thing I want to chime in. You know, similar to Jason, it took Campminder 6 or 7 years to get to our first million, and our attitude was like, let's build something that's strong and stable. And I think that when you move forward, it's 15 years now, and the way that we've built it slow and steady, we've built extraordinarily strong relationships with our clients. And you think of, like, I kind of think of it as like roots in for a tree. And when we're going through a really challenging time like we're going through now, where files are lost and camps have to do things during their busiest time of year, I'm talking to clients on the phone, and they're just like, I feel so bad for you guys. We love you so much. I'm sorry that you have to deal with this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it also, I think it also goes towards how we're able to focus on on the employees as well. It gives us more time to do that, makes them happier. They create a deeper relationship. I think it's great. So to get into some of the meat, so the next part of the title was going from 2 to 10 million. I want to talk about some examples of ceilings you had to bust through over time in going from 2 to 10. If you can sort of sequentially think about some of the catastrophes, dilemmas, agonies that you felt you were at a breaking point, and what got you to over that.
So one thing that I have learned, and I feel like we've gone through several plateaus. We've been able to grow pretty quickly, and then we've reached sort of a plateau. Maybe it was just the universe deciding to give us a little time to learn the next lessons that needed to be learned. But Survey Gizmo has now gone through several generations of the people involved. And one thing that was really hard to learn early on was the people that were really dear to you in the beginning, that would help you in the beginning start and go from 2 million to 3 million, might not even be comfortable in a larger organization. And they're probably not going to be the folks that will be with you when you turn from 5 to 7 and from 7 to 10. And the first couple of rounds of that was heartbreaking. I felt like I had done something incredibly wrong because they moved on. I was really hard on myself, or I was really angry with them. And in the end, it was a very natural progression. So that was one of the things that I actually had to learn. I love everyone that works for me, and I love everyone that worked for me that doesn't work for me now. And I hope they come back in the future. Most of them, 60% of them. Let me not think about that too much. And so, my relationship with everyone that works on staff at Survey Gizmo is very dear to my heart. And so that was one of the hardest things personally, because one of my deep desires is to be liked, for me to come to terms with.
So one of the awarenesses I got as we were scaling past, like maybe around 3 or 4 million, and we had, so there was a tipping point around 18 people. Before 18 people, it felt like it was entirely all me. Like I was telling every single person exactly what to do, which is like the first line of great management. And I was solely responsible for the culture. I set the behavior. I led by example. And after 18, I left this constraint. I couldn't have that kind of influence. And the team, the company, started to develop its own personality, its own culture. And that was definitely a ceiling, but it was also a big shift. We were talking about, there's this agony and ecstasy. The ecstasy for me in those instances was the fact that I found this amazing, beautiful meaning in my life that I had no idea existed before that. Like I started the company because I didn't want to be a structural engineer. And then I sold the product because I wanted someone to buy it, and I wanted to be able to generate some revenue. Then it was around the customers. Then it became about the product. And as the company scaled, I found my greatest sense of purpose was actually from the team, the organization. And I never would have thought in a million years that that was something that was going to make me tick. Because I don't know how many other entrepreneurs or business owners I had encountered along the way. They're like, oh, you own your own business? You have employees? I'm like, yeah, like 5. You're like, that sucks, right? Yeah, best business is a business with no employees. Let me tell you. And I would, kind of like, yeah, you're right. Because, paying payroll and all the problems, all that hit to you. But man, is it meaningful when you get that alchemy right. And so that realization at 18 people, and then when I left, we were at 75. It just was like peeling an onion. I thought it was great at 18, but then every time I peeled the onion, every challenge resulted in something that was so much more meaningful to me after getting through that challenge. And it felt like when I left, this was the hard part. The agony was selling the business and leading the company through the integration and getting even deeper into it, and then leaving. And realizing I no longer had that onion to peel. I could no longer reach more and more higher levels of purpose with that platform. Because I really felt like it was infinite. I felt like that was one thing about business that could completely scale. And it must be what the leaders of Southwest Airlines and Zappos and other companies that have that kind of reputation feel.
Thanks. Jan?
I'm not sure I remember what the question is anymore.
The question is, yeah.
Well, I'll tell you what's coming up for me. In listening to Jason, the question I think had to do with plateaus. Or
yeah, where you got stuck. You had a ton of pain at a certain stage, whether 2, 5 million, 7 million, 10 million.
Right. So it's hard for me to put it in context of revenue. It's always in context of place and time. And things that Jason are saying, as Jason's saying, are ringing true for me in terms of the people and the importance of surrounding yourself with good people, because in my experience and having surrounded myself with the great people that I've been fortunate to have around me, it almost doesn't matter what the challenge is. I know that I have people that I can lean on and who will lean on me, and and whatever it is, we can go through it. I'm thinking about Joe, who's now our director of software operations, and we were working, we had rented a house up Canyon, where there was no cell service, and we're working in a house, and Joe was the support person we hired, and we didn't have a desk for him, and he's sitting at a box, and now that's his desk, and now we finally ponied up, and we decided to sign a 3-year lease on a commercial space on Walnut. And the day we're moving out, it's opening day of camp in the Northeast, which is our big day for our photo system, and everything grinds to a halt, and text messages are happening, and every night for 3 days in a row, we had just taken clients away from, I don't want to say taking clients from competitors. Clients chose to come to us because they liked what we were doing, and they had chosen to leave a competitor, and our system was pooping the bed. And now I'm I have a personal guarantee on a lease on this place for 3 years that I can't afford, and we're tanking, but then you bring the team together and you brainstorm and you try to figure it out, and you stay up for 80 hours in a row and you figure it out, and we've solved the problem, and then now here we are in our brand new space, and we're a grown-up company, and it's hell yeah. I just think that's what comes up for me.
Great, thanks. In the inflection points that I've witnessed and been through and experienced as an operator myself, I think the hardest ones have been where we know we need more people on our team to take care of our customers or to take care of the opportunity in the market. And we're having a hard time finding the right people. And so all my existing team members are stressed and feeling shorthanded and feeling, and I feel the pressure to hire. But I also know at the same time that for each person I add, especially as we were a dozen people going to 20 or 20 to 30 or 30 to 40, Regiline was 70 people at 10 million in revenue. I knew in my gut, I knew that if I just hired someone to fill the role, it was going to weaken the company long term. For everyone else working there, for myself in my love of working at the company. And so I had a big conversation with the company many times, with company-wide meetings where I said, we are shorthanded, and I know the number one, single most important factor in employee happiness is who you sit next to. Liking the people you work with is the number one factor. And so I said, I'm going to give a choice to everyone here, because I was getting complaints that I wasn't saying yes to enough applicants coming in that everyone thought was good enough. And I said, I think it's worth us feeling this pain for a little bit longer so that someone is going to come up that is more than good enough, that is we're excited to have sitting next to us because we respect their work ethic, we like them as people, they're a good cultural fit. And that was those were the sort of most painful inflection points where you'd be like, how can we not find developers? How can we not find more good salespeople? How can we? We could feel the whole pain of the organization, and we held out. And I felt like I was that rudder on the ship that you could feel the wind hitting the sail real hard, and the ship wanted to turn, but I was trying to keep it going straight in that direction of I knew the single most important thing was having great people for my team to add onto my team to work with. And that was going to keep them around longer and have less turnover and that sort of thing.
So I noticed all three of us pretty much talked about inflection points having to do with people,
Yeah.
Or all four of us, I'm sorry. The one thing actually being a CEO of a growing company, and we're about 70 people right now, I note that I have very little actual direct control anymore. It seems like a great gig, but in fact, I actually have to touch things well before problems occur. And the biggest impact that you can have is by having a hand in controlling who joins the teams at your organization. Who are the leaders? How the leaders behave, how the leaders choose their own staff, and how we measure success, and the culture that is built from all of that. The culture when we were, pre-18 was pretty much me and Scott. We could pretty much directly control it on the ground floor every day. Now I don't have any control over it. It's made up of traditions and histories and stories and the people that we have hired. So to change it, I have to look at those items.
Mm-hmm.
I just quickly take the other perspective as the guy who has made really bad hiring decisions numerous times. I'm sure we all have. The times where I have not done what Bill did, where I need to hire this person, we really need this position filled, and I just knew I shouldn't have done it, and I did it. It really is bringing a cancer into the company, and it takes a really long time. I'm the kind of person that's like, this person's going to get it. Eventually, I'm just going to keep coaching this person, and eventually I'm going to change them and get them to get there. It never happens. So if I can impart one piece of my experience is that people do not change, and the longer you let people not change in your organization, the more cancer they spread, and the longer it takes for the cancer to heal. I think it's really just an important thing that I've learned.
And it is your responsibility.
And
it is my responsibility.
How many are in your organization right now?
45.
Okay.
Hey, I just want to point out a big difference between the guys on this panel and most for-profit businesses. They hire their leader, and no one hired us. We hired ourselves, and there's a point in the kind of growth of my business that I realized that like, holy shit, I don't know how many dozens of people were working for me at the time, because things weren't going well, and I started to look kind of inwardly. And you read about and hear about how who got you here won't get you there, and that includes yourself. And you hear about the founder that needs to kind of make room for the CEO to come in, and you can get a talk track in your head, because you don't want to be this leader that doesn't accept those other realities. You have to be introspective, but if you're going to be really introspective and self-aware about yourself as a leader, you realize that this is more of a dictatorship than a open democracy. And the staff did not elect me, and their investors did not elect me. And so I had to, I tried to challenge myself up, but I hit some ceilings on that.
Yeah, I think you bring up a really interesting point on the spectrum of open democracy towards dictatorship. I think in all my companies, I felt like the first dozen people, it felt like a democracy, right? Like everyone was chiming in on everything, it seemed like. And then as things evolved and you had to have teams and leadership and you just didn't have the time for everyone to chime in on everything anymore. And it was really hard for the original people who might have been there as the first dozen to sort of accept that their opinion's not being taken as much as it used to be. So there's a shift in that as well, I think. That's really interesting. One thing that I found was a big, since we're talking about people, a big epiphany in the business was when we brought on our first HR manager. And at how many employees were you when you did it, and what difference did it make in the shift of the company? You're gonna say
I'm laughing because my first HR manager didn't know anything about HR, and it actually didn't last long. And then later on, we ended up. How many employees? We were still in the house, Canyon, and we had 12 people, and like she was HR and like office manager and customer support, and what was the other part of the question?
And did it make a difference?
No.
I think we were about 25 people when Michelle DeSanto joined us as director of, we called it Director of Employee Happiness as a role rather than HR. And oh God, did it make a difference. That we had just reached a point, I mean, maybe we were closer to 30, I suppose, where there were fractions joining. I mean, the definition of who we were differed between who you actually asked. There was a little bit of infighting. Not everyone got along. And yes, I think at the center of it, I was probably creating a lot of chaos. And it was awesome. It was just that it didn't happen overnight, but the turbulence of the waters just started to settle until finally we had a calm-ish pond. It never completely goes away. And we were able to focus on the business again. We were able to look out at our customers rather than spending so much time looking at ourselves, wondering, is this really going to last, or are we going to just blow this thing apart and just all scatter to the wind? So it made a huge impact for us.
So I think one of the most meaningful inflection points that we had at Chip Compliant was when we stepped up and created a budget to actually hire somebody dedicated to this function. And through some previous experiments, similar to what Dan was sharing, realized that I didn't even like the term HR because it was too administrative, and it was around benefits and around compliance. But what we really needed to do was to find someone who would partner with me and would treat human resources, treat people with as much attention that we treat our product. Actually make it a strategic advantage, a competitive advantage of the company. That we were going to be not just the very best tax and compliance software company, we were going to be even better as a company that attracted, hired, and retained the very, very, very best talent possible. So that was the mission. And interviewed a lot of different people, ended up hiring Annalise Brown, who was at the time, I think, a manager of a Lululemon store in Boulder. But she got the vision. And it was so powerful to have someone that was totally aligned with that vision. And we were like, you know what, this HR stuff, just figure it out, or outsource it, or take some classes. But the priority was treating people as a product of the business. And man, things changed for us. And it scaled for us as well.
So one thing that is interesting now that we're beginning to be a grown-up organization, we're trying to structure ourselves for growth. Everyone has goals, and when we're looking at our human resources team, what was the actual goal there? In a lot of cases, it's to retain talent and attract talent, right? But that can actually lead to this concept of either overinflating what you are actually offering to people to get them to join, and in terms of retainment, you're actually trapping them in a golden cage. And so one of the things that we had to learn to relax, and this is part of the last plateau that we are on, is it's a compact between everyone that joins our team and between us and them. For the work that they give us, yes, we pay them, but we should also be accelerating what they are capable of in the future. They should be learning new skills and developing their career path, so that if something did go wrong with Survey Gizmo, every single person would walk out of that building better than they joined. And I think that a lot of organizations, particularly ones that I think are not customer funded, but instead investor funded, don't align that portion of their business well.
Okay. I'll speak from a little bit about Reg Online. The reason I brought up the question was because the wheels felt like they were coming off the bus at 25 or 30 people, where we couldn't hire fast enough. We had employees with a lot of different issues that weren't being met. There was a lot of questioning along whether they were making market compensation or not, and even though we were very generous with bonusing and perks and that sort of thing. And there's just drama on all sides. And when by hiring someone, and it's interesting because we interviewed a whole bunch of HR people, and they all were wanting to do just the tech, sort of the technical benefit stuff. And we found someone who actually is this, Michelle DeSanto, who's the HR director at Survey Gizmo. And it's suddenly like a similar thing as Jason talked about, and Christian, a calm hit that once she got up to speed in 6 months, that there was a sigh of relief. And I've also been involved, one of my other companies, we found that there were a lot of people leaving without giving real notice or real expectation that they were even unhappy. And in reflecting on it, it was because the only person they had to talk to was the founder owner, and it felt intimidated by the founder owner. And so they didn't have a place where they could really sort of start the conversation of, I'm not happy. And so that whatever you want to call it, director of employee happiness position is a really important venting point, a really important recruiting point that get the right people. And all in all, if I had to pick one thing in the 1 to 10 million, I'd say that one person made the biggest difference in my experiences with growing my companies.
Thank you. I'm learning a lot from this. I mean, I actually have somebody in an HR position now who's very good, and I'm feeling like we can leverage this person, and this person can play a role that's much more significant than she's currently playing. So thank you, guys.
So I want to touch on a couple more things. One is, so how do you guys grow yourselves? How do you level up for your organization? I was fortunate to be sitting next to John Mackey, the CEO of Whole Foods and founder, at a luncheon, and I said, what's been the biggest contributor to the growth of your organization in terms of, and he didn't miss a beat. He said, the growth of myself. Every time I leveled myself up in terms of a new level of understanding or knowledge or skill set that I was able to teach myself or learn from others, I saw the organization make a surge with me. So with that in mind, how do you guys level up? What is your means of growing yourselves?
I mean, I can answer the technical way and also what drives, but one thing that I think is really important, I spend a lot of time thinking, is how far are you willing or capable of leveling up? And I think you mentioned this before. So part of leveling up is looking at my shadow that I don't normally want to look at, that I have no comfort in looking at, and deciding that I will change that thing or I will compensate for that thing. So yes, I can learn a lot of technical skills. I can learn how to do various forms of analysis and stuff like that by reading books. But at every level of change, and I feel like, again, it's like every 6 months you have to change a little bit to evolve to a new point. I'm faced with a new challenge. What part of myself that I was before am I willing to let go to be in order to accomplish my goals that I have for myself, this company, and future companies that I want to have and to grow? And that to me is the learning point more than the details of learning. I mean, in details of learning, I read voraciously. I have stacks of books. I just will consume on average about one a day. I mean, they're business books, so they're kind of easy to skim. But they're not well written, let's be honest. But that's pretty much what I do. When on weekends, I am still learning. I don't really believe in taking time off. I'm listening to audiobooks if I'm working in the shop. I am thinking from the moment I wake up about myself, the business, where I want to go, and again, keeping those future dreams in the distance, saying, this is going to be painful. The agony for me of all of this is knowing way too much about myself. And then deciding that I was either going to accept it or try to change it. And I will actually argue, people can change, but it is rare, and it has to be done for a greater purpose, and there has to be a really good reason to do it. They don't change overnight, and it is never without pain.
I have a perspective on this that a leader of a company, whether they started it or they were hired into it, has a deep obligation to level up, or they got to get the hell out of the way. And even if it's your company that you started, by the time you're of a certain scale, you have thousands of customers that have put their money with you, that are depending on you for their business, and their employees are depending on that business, and so on. There's a ripple effect. It can be really positive, or it could be incredibly negative. And so you could take a perspective that it's very, very selfish of you not to get out of the way if you're the one that's in the way. And that's the way I looked at it. And my own experience of leveling up always tended to come during crisis. And there was probably the lowest, I would say the most profoundly low point for me in my experience at Chip Compliant came a few years ago when I felt like I'd hit the ceiling. I'd heard from others I was hitting the ceiling. It was just one of those, it was definitely one of those points, right? Like the organization, the company, the revenues, the growth, the product set was not advancing. And when I look back on it, I think it was, I was not advancing. I had hit the ceiling. And at that moment, I decided, you know what, the mature thing to do is to hire hire an experienced person to help run the business, and I'm going to be, the kind of the visionary guy off to the side. So went through a process of hiring a COO or a president, and everything was great on paper. I felt something wrong in my gut. I felt something wrong in my gut in the first 5 days at a customer meeting, and I dismissed it because it was irrational. It was an irrational fear that I was feeling. But the problem with that situation is that when you hire your president, you can't go to your staff or your old executive team and say, hey, is so-and-so a bozo, or are they working out? Because it undermines that guy. He's supposed to be your guy or girl. Then they are your guy until they're not. And so, and in a software as a service business, there's some, it takes a while for fuck-ups to manifest. And so it took about 10 months for the actual results to really manifest, irrefutable. You know what? It's not just your ego, Jason, that doesn't want to share the spot with this person. It's the fact that you're not making beautiful music together. And so I made the move to push him out of the business. The company growth had slowed dramatically. Good people started to leave. And I felt like I was kicking the guy out that everybody liked, because he basically raised everyone's rates, gave promotions, and never fired anyone.
Sorry.
So through that experience, I had to level up because I had made that mistake. I had to own that, and now I had to lead the company out of it.
How did you level up?
Did I?
What did you do to level up?
Well, tactically, one of the best things I've ever done is to seek out and join peer groups. And there's an organization called Entrepreneurs Organization, EO. There's others called YPO, Young Presidents Organization. There's others. But the key thing about those organizations is that everything's confidential. And for you to get something out of it, you have to be vulnerable. So you have to share. And a lot of times you have this braggadocious CEO that doesn't want to share and wants to appear like they have all the answers. But in that safe environment, you end up sharing, you end up exposing yourself. And when you share, when you become vulnerable, you allow others to point out your blind spots. And I think that's when you level up.
Mm-hmm. And it's easy to do through an organization like that. It's also, you can find peers in your own circle to connect with.
The thing that I want to chime in is, I guess similar to Jason, like I find my moments of growth through crisis, and you guys have learned about some of my crises today. But a couple summers ago, we were having a hard time, and I was kind of at a low, in terms of my happiness. The summertime can be stressful in the camp business when everyone's depending on us. And somebody introduced me to a personal leadership coach. And this person, I was supposed to meet with him today, and I had to cancel it because of everything I'm going through. And he just did a 360 on me, and I'm kind of disappointed. I wanted, because he did a 360 when I first started with him, and he went to everybody I work with most closely. And I had a very painful meeting with him after that, and I learned about all of my shit. But through meeting, I've been meeting with him pretty much every other week for 2 years, and and then recently I joined EO. And I agree. Having people to expose blind spots and to help you see, or help me see, where I'm failing other people and in what ways people perceive me and how I'm not leading well. In conjunction with, I've been on a meditation streak recently, which is something that my coach has led me to, and doing a lot of reading recently. These are all things, it's kind of like 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. The sharpening, for those of you who've read the book, the sharpening the saw thing, I find that element of it is really meaningful and helps me to level up.
Yes, there will. We're going to do, we have the room until 11, so we're going to start Q&A and another question, if that works. Yeah, we'll do Q&A probably right at 10:30. In terms of, I put it into 3 categories for my own growth as I've reflected on it over the years. Reading has been a huge pillar for me. Mentors have been a big pillar, and it's not just, it's a combination of, hey, my support team I think it's struggling. Who's got a good support team that I can talk to, get best practices from, but they're not like an ongoing mentor, they're just a subject matter mentor. And then there's mentors who are like, I really respect this person and how they think, and I want to hear their thinking more often, so I'm gonna proactively, try to schedule lunches with them on a regular basis. And then the third category is going to workshops with with other entrepreneurs, and it can be the peer group with EO and the events that they have, and the forums are hugely beneficial from an emotional standpoint. But the ability to lock myself in a room with a bunch of speakers for 3 days and be okay that 90% of it I'm just going to be like, no, doesn't apply, and then come out with 2 or 3 things in 4 days that just blow my mind. We've done a lot of learning from Zingerman's in Ann Arbor. If anyone knows them, they have a phenomenal program that teaches their secret sauce of how to create a great company. And we've just, all of our businesses have gotten a ton out of connecting with them. So I want to sort of move on to the next. So it's usually a topic that doesn't get talked about very much. Now that you've created success, do you worry about losing it? And how does the option of selling factor into that feeling? And Jason, it'd be great if you could talk about that as if it was sort of prior to selling kind of thing.
Yeah, sure. So maybe a few years ago, someone shared a concept with me that really resonated. They called it the entrepreneur's dilemma. And it's that, entrepreneurs are known as being risk takers, throwing caution to the wind and just going for it when everyone else thinks it's a terrible and stupid idea. But these same risk-taking personalities shift over time once they have actually created success. And the dilemma is that once they gain success, they don't want to lose it. They don't want to have to go back and do what they had to do to get there. In my case, it was 8 years to the first million. And those were some really, difficult, lean years where I envied the lawyer friends and doctor friends. I'm like, man, look at that job security. And I didn't, it was difficult to go kind of back through that. And so now, why did I sell? Mm-hmm. Oh. Didn't I just explain it? All right. Well, look, I'll be real about one thing, or something. This next thing, that
The other thing's not so real. Just
Forget everything else you said.
Yeah. So I heard something else. As a company, we were looking to make some acquisitions, because one of the kind of the overarching issues of my company was it was a niche of a niche. We were in a small market, and every year we thought we were tapping it out, and then somehow we cobbled together additional growth. And there's an article online by Jason Lemkin of SaaStr, if you guys are ever follow that, and it's like, don't underestimate your small market. And I would agree, because our small market has continued to yield more, but we still had that issue. And so we were looking to make acquisitions to kind of spur growth, expand strategically into other markets, trying to figure out because this is the dilemma. It's like, okay, you've nailed it. You've killed this one market. Now what do you do next? Do you sell the business, or do you evolve it? Because that's an issue that a company's got to face. They have to continue to evolve. Fundamentally, it's not just feature or iteratively. And so we were looking at making these acquisitions, and I hired an advisor, and he's like, Jason, look, you're never going to make an acquisition unless the person selling to you has been tenderized. I'm like, what do you mean? They're like, if they haven't been tenderized, they're not gonna sell. And so we thought about that, and I didn't realize myself, but in the year and a half or so before I accepted an acquisition offer on my business, I had been tenderized, like fully. And I had been tenderized to the point where I had lost a lot of my own faith in my ability to lead the business, and I began to kind of tell myself that it would be better for the team, for the customers, to partner up with an organization that could kind of provide this next level of growth. And I shared the story about hiring the wrong guy, and that kind of slowed our growth down, losing a few people, letting them go. And at the same time, we had 5 or 6 strategic inbound interests on the company for multiples on the business that well exceeded a level I'd ever put in my head as like, wow, if that ever happened, that'd be worth considering. And so this all kind of happened all at the same time. And so I think it's a real challenge, and I greatly admire the founders that are able to, you hear about like 99 out of 100 companies can't get to 2 million, and then so on and so forth. The ones that are founder-led and founder-led forever are even rarer, way rarer, because the challenges and the pressures, even though I owned a majority of my business, I still felt that pressure from smaller shareholders that were like, hey, this is going to make a big change in my life, and also the obligation to the team to, how do I maintain this growth? How do I continue to create a place where they can grow? So I had those thoughts swimming around in my head, and I didn't think I was able to do it.
Okay, thank you.
So I was probably started getting tenderized last year, actually, to be honest. That's a really disturbing concept, by the way.
Tenderized?
Yeah, oh, God,
Tender.
yeah,
Tinder,
that's
tender.
another story. So believe it or not, I have a weird admission. I actually don't like risk. I am an entrepreneur, but I actually don't like it. I like opportunity. So one of the things that later in last year was I was thinking about it. I was like, okay, you know what? Yes, I could sell. And you know what? I will be able to live the rest of my life in retirement really well. Because thanks to SurveyMonkey and a couple of other large vendors in the field, valuations for companies like mine are really high right now. Thank you so much. And I thought about it, and it's not guaranteed that they will always be that high. So that maybe that's some fear of loss at that point, that I've made a mistake by deciding not to do that. But the realist in me basically said, do I actually know why I'm successful in the first place? I mean, my ego says I could totally do it again. And I have a really healthy ego, so it was speaking very loudly. But the realist in me was like, well, maybe you should actually see if you could do it again, just on the side. Quite frankly, you're not particularly engaged right now anyways. You have time. This was at a point last year where I was actually taking more naps at work than doing work. Sorry, Bill. I was going for long walks and taking naps, and it was nice. I was in good shape. So I started an incubator company upstairs, and I started experimenting and really thinking about what I thought had made Survey Gizmo successful. And you know what? I'm continuing that experiment because I was wrong. I don't know. I don't think I could go and do it again. I am unconsciously incompetent about what that early success was, and I didn't take notes. And even if I was taking notes, I still might not have known. I don't think Survey Gizmo is tapped out in any way. Yes, it is really hard to grow sometimes. We have some very funded main competitors right now. And we are taking the slow and steady wins the race approach, and we will win. We will be a $100 million company, and then we will be a $200 million company. And I don't know what my position will be at that point. I don't know if I will reach a point where it is more responsible to switch, but I'm not at that point yet. Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, I mean, I think the fundamental question was, is there an element of trying to protect the success? And I mean, a year and a half ago, I became a dad of twins, and so I know what it feels like to be a dad now, and I definitely can see a parallel between the feeling that I have with my kids and the feeling that I have with my company. So yeah, there's a real element of protecting what we've created. You know, there are companies in our industry who see what we've been able to accomplish, and they see money there, and they want to nip at our heels. And anytime we delete people's files, they're like, they deleted your files, you know. So like, I hope they don't know. Maybe they probably, hey, you're on video, you know. And like we've had meetings with our team, and as far as the meaning behind what we do, I try to remind our employees, look what we've created together. Look who surrounds you. Look how good the people are who are here. Look at the culture that we have. Look at this community. We owe it to ourselves and to this company to keep on keeping on. And I haven't been tenderized, but I've had a lot of people reaching out to me, and I just find myself not wanting to have the conversation. Like I just don't want to take the 20 minutes and fill them in on what the latest happenings are at Campminder. I just am not interested in it. And I realize that there's a part of me that's potentially crazy for feeling that way. But then I talk to guys like Bill and Jason, and I see it reminds me why I do what I do. I love what I do. And even when I'm in the midst of dealing with the most complicated problem I've ever had to deal with in the last couple of days, I can wake up 2 days later and be like, we're going to get through this, and it's awesome. So I don't want the money. I mean, whatever.
Right. Okay. So I think we've hit our time. If people need to leave, that's great. We're going to continue on with some Q&A. I'll just chime in on this last topic. And yeah, feel free to leave if you need to.
We'll miss you, though.
You know, I can provide this sort of retrovistic perspective on having sold Reg Online 8 years ago. It was a company, if we could go back, I think my partner and I probably wouldn't have sold it. And a couple of big reasons why is because we grossly underestimate how unique the company, having a platform really is, and how hard it is. And I think, Christian, you really, by doing your experiments and trying to create new companies with, while you have your company, was brilliant. Because the reality is my partner, who's tried to start a lot of different companies, hasn't succeeded either at recreating a company. And 8, 9 years later, he's like, wow, I used to wake up every morning and be the captain of a ship. And yeah, there was times it was really annoying, and times I felt bored, and times I felt scared, or times I felt like I might miss out on my valuation. But the most important, fulfilling thing from an entrepreneur standpoint is having a platform to create with. And that, I think, in terms of growing our companies from 2 to 10 million, creating them in a way that we really love creating more with our teams and the structures that we've created in the companies. And I like to make the analogy that we're not entrepreneurs from when we're at 2 to 10. We're business architects. And we want to architect the most beautiful palaces or places that we can come to work every day and work with people we really enjoy creating with. And that power of creation is huge, especially in the customer-funded company, especially in a company that, between my companies, we're doing 30 million in revenue and 10 million in profit with just the entrepreneurs and partners in the business. That's a lot of money that we can enjoy life without having to kill the goose, okay? And so the question of, seeing a big dollar sign out there that, maybe we could go buy a private island with, it's not worth it. It's if we're profitable and able to live a very nice life, and still keep our golden goose or our platform that we can create more with. If I could go back in time, I would have given myself that message. So that's kind of the end point of this discussion. Before I get into Q&A, I just want to, anyone can go at any time if the Q&A doesn't fulfill you. But we're starting, Jason and I started this thing, and literally just put a little splash page up. Jason helped put a splash page up last night called sovereignty.com. And look up in the dictionary how to spell sovereignty. But it's about customer-funded companies that are really excited about growing great companies and want to have more of a community. Because we've discovered every time we talk to people about this, they're like, we need more. We want to connect with more people about more entrepreneurs who are doing this kind of stuff. And so we want to create a community or environment by which we can connect more people who have the same feeling. So go to sovereignty.com, put your name and email in, and Jason will email you a daily affirmation on customer-funded businesses. Right. So if you want to continue the conversation, we'd love to continue it that way. And don't use the R word. So anything else?
Any questions?
Let's bring a mic around. Go ahead.
Actually, I was interested in, before you got to 2 million, what was that like, or how did you fund yourself or survive during that period? And most of you weren't really, I would assume,
I gave away both mics.
profitable during the whole time.
Customers. I mean, right from the beginning. I mean, our first year was profitable by $14, and the second year was much more profitable, although I hadn't quite told my business partner that I owed a lot of money to the IRS. So the IRS took that. But I paid it back. Yeah, so customers have funded us from the very beginning.
Yeah, it was the same here. It's just a matter of like scraping and clawing. There are moments where there's nothing. There's like $500 in the bank account at the beginning, and just I didn't have any finance people, so like writing down what I owed employees for the next few months and figuring out like if it's going to work, and just a little bit of crossing fingers, but just going through it. So
There's a very simple formula. Don't hire another person unless your revenues can afford it. It's just that. I mean, it's a very simple equation. People get ahead of themselves and think of borrowing money and taking on investors. It gets them an extra employee that then can get them further. That I found it tends to be a trap. It's not black or white, but it tends to be a slippery slope where it's hard to pull out of that.
Including yourself. So
Yes.
for the first 2 years, while we might have been profitable, we weren't taking money out.
And how did you fund yourself then? How'd you pay? How'd you
I was a consultant. So
you had a side business.
I had a side business. I kept going for a full 2 years. Scott was able to actually quit his job in the first year, but even he was living off of savings for that first year. Our first 2 employees were paid before we were, and I have a huge fear of not being able to ever make payroll. Like that would be my worst day ever, because that's kind of key to the compact of having staff.
Okay. So we only have 5 more minutes, so I want to kind of cycle through on the questions, and maybe we'll just have one person. Oh, right here. Sorry. And then we'll come back.
Yeah, I just want to dive in. I'm glad you was just brought up of paying yourself or funding yourself or paying someone else. I guess what for either three of you, how in the very beginning when you first paid someone, how'd you do it? Was it a full salary at first? Was it like here's $500? Like how did you get there? Because you were bootstrapping the whole way.
So I hired heartbeats. So if they were alive and they were willing to work for me, they got the job. Over time, their qualifications became more important, and so we had very, very low salaries and a totally dysfunctional culture.
my story is weird. I was, just out of college, and a camp who found out about CampMinder said, "Here's this guy Joe Norris. He's retired, but he built our database system." And my situation was very weird in the sense that, I was living in Miami, Florida at the time, and he flew himself at his own expense to meet me because he liked the idea, and he was just really willing to kind of, on faith, work with me to help me out. And I paid him what I could when I could, and he was just the kind soul who was willing to go through, this with me. And, I wrote him $500 checks here, $1,000 check there, and fast forward all these years later, he's not really working anymore, but he's on our payroll.
Great. So do we have just a step up in the later stage questions over here? Thanks.
As a founder of the company, and I'm curious, Jason, a little bit more about your mindset. When you go through the contemplation of, well, maybe I'm not the right person to run the business. Do I sell it? Do I hire somebody? I've reached $10 million. I want to go to 20. When you're kind of grappling with that, can you walk us through kind of your mindset of, you obviously experimented first with the CEO, and then you chose to sell. Why didn't you try another CEO? Or was it just so obvious to you that you wanted to go do something else?
No, it wasn't obvious to me. So I've been talking to a number of entrepreneurs that are thinking about selling, and so now I've got a playbook of all right, well, here's how to. And one of the first things is to really be clear about what your future vision, what your envisioned future is. And to know what you want your life to look like 10 years from now. And is your company the best vehicle to get you there, or is selling the company and using a pile of cash the best vehicle to get you there? I didn't have that clarity, and so instead, if you don't have that certainty and that clarity, you get kind of whipsawed by opportunity. And I was reacting to opportunity. I was reacting to making an attempt, not getting there, having a ton of interest at levels that were, frankly, the right levels at the time, and also the strategic long-term issue of, can we keep scaling in our industry, and what is it going to take to make our next bet, pull off our next bet? I was at a crossroads, and I was either going to have to commit to building the company for another 5 years. I was 16 years in, or take money off the table and pair up. So that was the rational.
So we got time for one more question, back of the room here.
You mentioned your adversity to risk, and it's been my experience with company failures that when you have a customer, you mitigate probably half that. If you look at the startup failure rate, how much better is it when you start with a customer? Or is it?
Could you repeat the question just really
Sure.
succinctly for me? Sorry.
Sure. The startups have a high failure rate. When you start with a customer, I think that number would seem to be less. From my experience over the last 30 years of liquidating lots of companies that failed, the ones that failed that didn't make it, they didn't have customers. And we could tell that right away. We do a restructuring. We can make it half. You can learn to live without an arm or a leg. No customers, no company.
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna feel this one because I get it comes up all the time. I say to people who are thinking about raising money, well, should I be raising money or should I be getting customers? It's like whether you raise money or not, you have to get customers. It's the only reason a business exists. And so if you focus on getting customers first, your probability of survival increases versus getting money first and then figuring out how to get more customers after. Does that answer the question? I mean,
I would also argue that you have to be pretty good at understanding the making good sunk cost decisions. So you've invested a lot in trying to get this thing started, but if you don't have any customers after a certain amount of time, change or go do something new, or go back and get a job for a while and then do something on the side. You have a longer runway for that.
so we need to wrap up. I think there's another session here at 11. We're gonna head outside to get some fresh air. It's kind of hot in here. And then if you guys have more questions, I'll stick around. I don't know if you guys have time to do that or not, but.